Our next question also can be framed in two different ways. Write in brief about Lamarckism or write a short note on Lamarckism. So Lamarckism was an idea about evolution that was given to us by the scientist John Baptist Lamarck. According to him, what is the driving force behind evolution are morphological changes in the physical appearance of the living beings. And these changes happen because either the living beings use a particular organ more or they do not use it. That is what we mentioned in our first point. So John Baptist Lamarck proposed that morphological changes occurring in living organisms are responsible for evolution, and the reason behind these morphological changes is the activity or the laziness of these organisms, right? So a very bold idea at that time, and in fact at that time it was widely accepted whatever he had to say. He gave us a few examples. The first example he gave, that of a giraffe. The neck of the giraffe, to be more specific. According to him, the ancestors of giraffe did not have a tall neck. But once all the leaves on the lower trees were exhausted, the giraffe were tempted to eat the leaves on the taller trees. Hence, they stretched their neck. This is an example of activity. And because they attempted to reach these leaves, the neck increased in size. So, here is an example of activity leading to a morphological change, and this morphological change being passed on to the next generation. Hence, according to Lamarck, when the next generation of giraffe were born, they were already born with slightly taller necks. So, the point is something like this: the neck of the giraffe has become too long due to browsing on the leaves of the tall plants by extending their neck for several generations. So, generation after generation, the necks went on increasing. Then, to explain us, he uses the example of the ironsmith. The ironsmith, frequently they have to do these hammering movement, because of which their muscles get developed. This is again an example of activity leading to morphological change, a very good example. Shoulders of the ironsmith have become very strong due to frequent hammering movements. Then he goes back to explaining about different creatures like birds like ostrich and emu, for example. What he says is, wings of the birds like emu and ostrich have become weak because of not using them, because they settled on the ground, because there was a lot of food over there. They did not need to go here and there in search of food. Then he spoke about the legs of birds such as swans and ducks. They have webbings in between them, so they have been developed for swimming, right? So legs of the birds like swan and duck have become useful for swimming due to living in the water. So these are the few examples. Yet another example, he talks about the snake. Because of the burrowing habit of the snake, the ancestor of the snake eventually lost the limbs. So snakes have lost their legs by modifications in their body for the burrowing habit. Now, all these examples are types of acquired characters. So these are characteristics that the organism has acquired during the lifetime. They were not born with it, right? So acquired characters, and they are transferred from one generation to another. This is called as the theory of inheritance of acquired characteristics. We already know inheritance or heredity is something that is passed from one generation to another. What is being passed over here? The characteristic that an organism acquires during its lifetime is being passed on. Hence, it is called as the inheritance of acquired characters, or it is called as Lamarckism. Now, the development of organs. One part of the theory was accepted, another part was rejected. That when living organisms use a particular organ, it gets developed, or when they do not use it, it gets degenerated in that particular generation. That was accepted, but that acquired characteristic being passed on to the next generation, that part was rejected. So development of organs due to specific activity or their degeneration due to no use at all was widely accepted, but the transfer of those characteristics from one generation to the next generation was absolutely rejected, right? That is why Lamarck's theory is not what we study to a large extent nowadays. It is the Darwin's theory that is the dominant theory in science that we study. So because it has been verified many times that modification brought in us are not transferred to the next generation, and thereby Lamarck's theory was disapproved. A very good example of this can be, if an animal loses a limb, we can say this is an acquired characteristic. Does not mean this animal will give birth to a child that is without a limb. So very important example to think about, and that is why a part of the Lamarck's theory was rejected.